connection. See, that's perfect. We can just do that right there.
Yeah.
So we don't even need to, I don't even need to change that.
Oh.
So we don't need to, we'll have it face the other way.
Yeah.
Like that, and just keep it there. And that way it'll freak out everybody.
Yeah.
And then when we come in, people can just come around here. And I think this will work.
I'm just gonna.
Hey folks, can actually anybody hear us in terms of what's going on here? You can have that, and I can have this. And so we are all getting set. So I think that we're live. I think that there are 8 people in there. Hey, thank you very much for going ahead and joining us today. Helena, who is the more active one of this particular dynamic duo. And we have all kinds of stuff. So here is the setup. And I think that you could probably hear me. Can you hear me on the Instagram? We are on both YouTube. Hi, YouTube. On the SDU Center for American Studies account. Thank you very much for joining us. And we are also on Instagram. The problem with Instagram, besides that, the problem with Instagram is that apparently the center on Instagram does not have enough followers for us to go live on that account on Instagram. So we're just using my account. This is a Center for American Studies takeover on Instagram for a second by my account. And then of course we're on the account on YouTube. So hello.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you joining us at this hour because it might be super early for some of you. So we're really thankful. We're going to be live until about 11:30?
Yeah, I think
11:30 Danish time.
So, 11:30 Danish.
So we're not going to be on here for like 6 hours for any of you who are in the US. We're going to have some people come around, talk a bit about the Declaration, and I think it'll be fun. And
there are people who have read my code. Thank you very much for having actually read the book and admitting to it. I really appreciate that. Just a quick tech chat. Tech check. Can everybody hear us? So just let us know, because we're not sort of getting any kind of feedback as to whether or not you can hear us, because we're using 2 different audio systems. One for the Instagram, which is using these nifty wireless mics, and then the other one we have a bigger mic for the YouTube. So just let us know you can hear us. Great.
Nice.
One of the great things is that for particular people who are here, a lot of them have been members of this community for a very long time. And so Grandma Kathy in particular. So thank you very much, folks, for showing up. Great. So everybody can hear us. So that's fantastic. And so, like as Helena said, well, we're gonna obviously we're gonna talk about the stuff with the 250th. We can talk about the book. We can talk about the guests that are here. We already had one session this morning in which Frank Cogliano set up kind of the context of, I guess, different ways that the different anniversaries, the 50th, the 100th, the
200th,
the sesquicentennial, the 150th in 1926, and the bicentennial. Now, one of the interesting things that he pointed out that Helena will not have any knowledge of, but I was 5, was the bicentennial, and I know, and we have talked about that, the bicentennial, a bit. I mean, one of the things that Frank pointed out this morning was that there was a People's Bicentennial Commission, and I didn't know that. I hadn't ever. I don't remember that from when I was a kid, and I don't. So if any of you remember a sort of a left-leaning People's Bicentennial Commission that apparently was very active in 1976 and in the years leading up to the bicentennial, let us know, because it would really be interesting to sort of hear more about it. Hey, Chicago. Thank you very much for really for tuning in. We appreciate it. We understand that in Chicago, dear Lord, Kathleen, Lord bless you for being up. I hope you have some coffee and that it's worthwhile. So what did you think about Frank's?
I thought it was really interesting. He talked about a lot of stuff that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So it was really interesting to hear how it's been celebrated over time. But I really found it interesting how you could tell how the way in which it was celebrated was very much shaped by its contemporary moment. Mm-hmm. Like with the 200th, it was very activism based, mm-hmm. which makes sense because it was right after Vietnam. And then, of course, now it's I mean, dare I say, ridiculous of the stuff that's going on, which I guess fits with this current administration. I don't feel bad saying that. I mean that. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting to get that point of view because we don't really hear that a lot. I mean, it's there for us to find, but I like sort of having it wrapped up nicely in a way that is tangible for a lot of people. Because if you look into it yourself, it may be really overwhelming. Dear Lord. So yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was really interesting.
And for those of you who remember the bicentennial, yeah, again, let us know what you were thinking about. So Anthony, I was 13. I remember walking around to all the free stuff that was available all the time.
Love freebies.
Yeah. What I remember was, I remember I remember a Freedom Train, I think that Amtrak had, and I kind of remember this Conestoga wagon. You know, when I was growing up on the Chesapeake Bay, we would go to Pennsylvania and all the time, and I remember kind of a Conestoga wagon sort of going from one end of the country to the other. And I remember a day in elementary school where we all had to dress up as if we were as if it was 1776. So I'm 5 years old wearing wearing these outfits. It really primed me for my job at Colonial Williamsburg, I think, a long time later. But that it's kind of that vague kind of performative stuff that I remember. I don't remember kind of anything substantive about it, but I guess no 5-year-old would.
No, probably not. Probably not. I mean, the dressing up part, of course, that's fun, but everything else is just...
One of the things that Frank pointed out was, and I want to know whether or not you guys are all finding this to be kind of reflected in what you are experiencing, is that he thinks that it's more muted, that there's a kind of an ambivalence of people and of institutions like museums, and he referred to Monticello and Mount Vernon and other places. He didn't state Monticello, but Mount Vernon, but he implied it several times, and that there is less of an interest in doing anything overt, lest it be seen as being political, and by political is supporting the right, supporting the. I think that was what he was implying. Maybe I missed that.
That's how I heard it too, I think.
Yeah, he told a really interesting story. For those of you who don't know, Frank, for a while was at Monticello, and he was one of the finalists for the job that Jane Kamensky now has to run the whole place. But one of the things that he pointed out in terms of Monticello's history, that in 1926, they were going to invite Al Smith to speak at Monticello for the sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary. Al Smith at the time was governor of New York. He was Catholic, and he was gearing up to run for president in 1928. But apparently the Ku Klux Klan put a pressure campaign. I want to make sure I'm remembering the story correctly.
I think you're right.
Put a pressure campaign on Monticello.
Yeah.
Something like 4,000.
A lot of people.
Like just this massive avalanche of pushback in order to protest the fact that a Catholic was going to speak at Monticello. And so the people who were in charge of Monticello, in the best Thomas Jefferson, let's separate religion and the state, decided to disinvite or to get Al Smith to not accept the invitation to speak at Monticello. So they caved to the Ku Klux Klan because Al Smith was Catholic, and you couldn't possibly have a Catholic representing Thomas Jefferson and being at Monticello. I'd never heard that, and I thought that was interesting. But and then he said that it's made Monticello less inclined to engage in anything that could be seen as overtly political. But just for those of you who kind of remember that a couple of weeks ago, Monticello announced that they were giving the Jefferson Medal to the Chief Justice, to John Roberts, and I think that's doing some work there, which in terms of politics, and then a lot of the one of the big. I don't know if it's big. I mean, we talked about it last night. For those of you who are sort of following along with our stuff, we were at pub last night, welcoming everybody in, and we're able to sort of catch up on a lot of these questions. And one of the things that is kind of hanging over this is the Supreme Court decision yesterday that gutted the last enforceable provision, Article 2 of the Voting Rights Act. and that's kind of like hanging over a lot of this.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the comments over here. We have people from all over. That's amazing. Minneapolis, Philly. You guys are up early.
Yeah, you guys are up early.
You guys are up so early.
and we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so let us know, and so let us know what kind of questions and everything that you have about what's going on. The first inkling, Minneapolis here back then, home was Scottsdale. The first inkling it's happening. Oh, was King Charles speaking to Congress? That's interesting. And that's kind of sort of an interesting overtone too in terms of Charles being here.
Yeah. 50 years ago,
was living a mile high in Guatemala with the Peace Corps.
Okay.
Oh, wow. And that's, and I think that for those of you who are sort of members of this community, I think that a lot of you know how close I was to Sergeant Shriver. And so I really appreciate anybody who's sort of involved with the Peace Corps. But I think that that's kind of like that's kind of a very interesting way to sort of think about what the bicentennial is and what it can be, how the kind of work that was doing down there. Montreal's here. Wonderful.
Wow. People from all over.
And so what's going on right now is a discussion with Steve Sarson and Mark Thompson, and maybe we can grab them. Steve Sarson, there are really important things to talk about with both of those scholars, so I hope that we can get them on. One of them is Steve's book on the Declaration of Independence, which I don't have a copy of with me, but we can grab it. It is essentially a field guide to the Declaration. It's a real good toolkit to unpack the Declaration. And because he's putting it into this wonderful historical context. And so I think it could be really useful to folks to use as a kind of teaching thing. And then Mark is working on an interesting project that we were testing out a bit last night.
Yeah.
Which is well, how would you describe it?
It was like, if you were to ask the founding fathers all kinds of questions, what would they say based on their contemporary time, what they know? So you couldn't ask them about, like, it's an AI model. You couldn't ask them about, what do you think about Donald Trump? They would say, I don't know who that is. But it was really interesting to see the way that they responded. They had sources for the stuff that they were saying. So you could tell it wasn't just something that this person might have said this, we're not sure, but it was based on facts. And they were also talking in the language of the time, which I really like too. It wasn't trying to be hip. It was very formal.
Yeah.
Very nice. And I think it could be, it's meant for students and historians to get a better understanding. Like, damn, why can't I just ask him? Well, now you can. So
yeah, it's really extraordinary. It's this massive, AI, this massive LLM that has taken, I think he said that he built one for Frederick Douglass, one for Benjamin Franklin, one for Hamilton.
Yeah.
And I think one or two others, in which it's all of the documents that are available that you can go ahead and crunch into an LLM. And then, as Helena said, is that you can query it. And then it has taken in so much of their manner of speaking and their manner of writing that they will respond to, that the AI will respond to as them in a shockingly accurate, authentic way. And so one of the other benefits of it, as Helena pointed out, is that this is it's not just assertions, in which case that you just trust that it's right. It actually provides, like almost inline notes. And so it's actually quite good, but the kind of thing that you can't. So but it will respond as Benjamin Franklin, right? So one of the things that we sort of entered into it to ask Benjamin Franklin was about, some views about race. Well, Franklin would have been defensive about that, and the response was fairly defensive.
Yeah, it was.
So if you think you're going to do a gotcha out of it, what you're going to get is sort of a response that kind of replicates what they would have done. And I thought that was kind of cool, a kind of cool use for AI. And so he's got some cool projects going on there.
Yeah, I really liked it too. Like I said, I think it could definitely help students a lot, because I think for a lot of people, it's a time period that is so far away. So it's hard to understand and put yourself into that space. So it'll make it so much easier to do research and just say, I'm just going to ask the source. Like,
Yeah, and I thought
amazing.
it was interesting the way it changes the way to do searches. I mean, I think like for us people who are ancient, we're sort of used to kind of Boolean searches, right? You just put in words and then it will crawl looking for the words, and then you get all of the results that are focused on everything that has that word in it. What this does, and then you got to do what? You've got to search through 250 different episodes of that word showing up to think whether, well, is it in context, is it the right word, in order to be able to get anything that you want, and how much time that takes. But this one will understand the context of the query in a way that I still frankly don't understand.
No,
so I'll understand the context of the query, like what you are intending to mean by it, and then conduct that search. So you're getting a relevant response to it. And I just think that's, when we're talking about uses of the 250th, which is the whole reason why we're here, that's an interesting use of it, to think about, well, how can we better access all of these records of all of these people? Because there has been kind of a human flaw in that research. You've got these folks left behind just as a sort of as an emblem of their privilege, right? Had left behind just all of this correspondence, all of these papers. And for a human to kind of get in there and kind of get through it is, well, it's a drag. And then and that was limited to, could you get to the archive? You had to be there in person to do all of this stuff, because I mean, I'm old enough that was still the way of doing all research when I started this. But then it turns to digitization, and so you could do online searches for it, and that could help you a little bit more. But this is light years even beyond that.
Yeah.
So Mark is here talking about that right now, and Steve. So we can grab them too, and maybe grab Frank. So,
yeah.
What are you guys talking about here? What's the Olivia asked a great question. We talked about this a little bit. What do you think? What is the environmental impact of these LLMs? Right. When we that's an important point, right?
That is important.
We cannot just simply say, well, look at all of these values, all of these gains that come from using them, without talking about the costs and making sure that we are clearly laying that out.
Yeah. That's the thing. This is really good, but it comes at a price, of course. I don't know what the specific impact is for his, but I know in general, really bad.
Yeah.
really, really bad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you were to use AI, use something like this.
Well, right.
As opposed to, what should I make for breakfast? Chat, help me. Don't do that. You're wasting so many resources on that.
Don't use generative AI to actually get your mental health care.
No.
So it is a kind of like, if it's going to be a resource, and that's a, it's kind of the question that I don't want to say bristled is really the right word, but when Frank mentioned that Thomas Jefferson's last letter was not the famous one he wrote to the organizer of the 50th anniversary celebration in DC, which is very famous, and it's Jefferson characterizing the American Revolution and everything that they did to support freedom around the world. It was an order for more wine from France. And everybody kind of chuckled, say, "Oh, Jefferson. So, more wine from France. Oh, what that scamp? Isn't he charming? Oh, Jefferson, more wine from France. Well, paid for by the people whose lives he's exploiting every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like, but I don't want to step out on too much of a limb, but that's kind of what I think about with the LLMs, right? Is that you have to go ahead and keep both of these in your head at one time. You can't just say, well, there's this great value that comes from them, without really understand what is the harm that is actually underwriting that. And so I very much appreciate that check, Olivia.
Yeah, that was a good question, because that is important to have in mind with stuff like this.
And
sorry.
Oh no, I was sort of thinking about well, and it's because it's too easy for us to want to go ahead and be safe and comfortable in these conversations. And if you care about being safe and comfortable in conversations, I guarantee you wouldn't be here. So I know we're preaching to the choir a little bit as far as having difficult conversations. But that's one of them, is that we can't, and that's why I think having a kind of digital engagement here in which we're holding each other accountable by continuing to raise those kind of points, so we are balancing them, that's a valuable thing. Devon Bledsoe said it's interesting how many grievances in the Declaration are happening again right now in America. We were talking about those grievances last night. And one of the things that we talked about is how Jefferson and the writers of the Declaration get them wrong, right? And that was one of the posts that we made yesterday, that the grievances were real enough, but the assignment of responsibility for those grievances at the foot of George III is not just wrong, but they knew it was wrong. It was intentionally wrong. And we can talk about those explanations as to why they made the choice to frame them that way. But the work that's doing now, it's the consequence that's more important of getting that wrong, of saying, okay, it's George III's fault, meaning it's an executive's fault. It's a bad actor at the top's fault. And so because it's so much a part of American political culture, that there's this idea that we're always kind of looking for George III when things are going wrong. And so if you just kind of get rid of him, if you replace one king with another, replace one executive with another, then all better. Instead of looking at where the problem really lay, and their problem, of course, is with Parliament and the ministry. That's a tougher rhetorical argument to make, particularly if you want help from France and Spain, which are absolute monarchies. And so it's interesting the kind of work that getting that wrong has done in American political culture for being wrong in that particular way, in terms of where we tend to settle blame for that kind of authority. So it's not just a problem for historians to kind of say, oh, well, they got it wrong. It's actually doing work in our political culture today that doesn't help us very much. Mm-mm. Card catalog forever. Thank you, Anthony. I love card catalogs. Have you ever seen a card catalog? Does anybody want to explain a card catalog to Helena? So do we want to see whether we can grab somebody to join us?
Who should I grab?
Because we have other students. We have Carolina. We have some of our undergraduate students. We have Sebastian who's here. We have the other folks who are here for this. So I think I don't know whether they're still going.
I think Maisha's on right now. So
okay, because
it would be this is for me to get Carolina.
Yeah, one of the things about the setup for this, which I didn't know until I was 9 o'clock old, was that it's all happening in the same room. I thought that there was going to be breakout rooms, and that so people could kind of move around and would be a little bit more free flowing. That's not how it's being done. Everything's in the same room, so it's a little. We don't want to be rude by dragging people out in the middle of somebody else's program or somebody else talking. So that's why we're a little looser on the guests than we had intended. So you're stuck with us a little bit longer, but we want to go ahead and do our best to sort of bring people out. Olivia's back. It's my understanding that generative LLMs are nearly impossible to be sustainable because of the sheer magnitude of computing required, perhaps a hybrid of human expertise and other niche AI tools. And at what point we can keep going down this road a little bit. At what point does it become? I mean, it's absolutely unsustainable. And so at what point does it become the shrinking of those resources that will determine a shrinking of the use of a change in the way that they're used, that there's that kind of calculation that needs to be made? Because I just don't see, I am inherently, I don't want to say negative. I have a healthy level of cynicism, I think, about human nature, policing themselves in terms of it's like people who recycle aren't the people who need to recycle.
That's true. That is true. And just doing that is not going to be what has the real impact.
Yeah.
I mean, I do it. I recycle. I am very much about all that, like the Danish person that I am with pant and everything. But I think there's so much more to do than just that.
Yeah.
This is not going to be me talking about the environment for the next 20 minutes because I could do it for 2 hours. But yeah, there's a lot to consider about it for sure.
And that's sort of I think it's a valuable conversation to have, because when we're thinking, as we do in these spaces a lot, when we're thinking about resistance, when we're thinking about abuse of authority, when we're thinking about it mostly in terms of politics and power, and when we have other kind of serious problems out there, such as climate change, sort of environmental issues, is that how do we make sure that we are focusing our energies, in the right spot? And all of us are going to kind of privilege our own thing. I mean, for me, if you don't get rid of the fascists, then the rest of it doesn't matter. But there are sort of other approaches to this. And so it's interesting that some of you, I was thinking this, is there any way to put the Christian nation to rest? And that's spawned from some groups have rallied around Franklin, their perception of the Great Awakening, claim America was founded as a Christian nation. Helena, you want to take that one on?
Oof, I don't know. That's a big one.
Well, Carolina can take that one on.
Yeah.
Well, this is the thing, is that it's that because of how it has really taken hold of chunks of American political culture, that there is a way to kind of knock it down, but you can't be nice about it, right? I mean, you got to go ahead and take swings. And we're gonna invite one of our no,
wait. You can
Sit nice and close to you.
yeah, there you go. So
I'm just in here.
there we go.
Middle now.
Okay, so what we're going to do is position ourselves so that none of us is on the camera,
Yeah,
except for Helena.
except
Helena's
for
just going to
me.
be over here. I'm going to be over here. Helena's just going to stay centered.
Oh
just
yeah,
saying.
because that camera. Yeah.
I know.
okay.
So,
yeah, we have
so
two.
Carolina, say hi to Instagram and
Hello,
say hi
Instagram.
to YouTube.
Hello, YouTube.
And we've got peoples.
We've
That's
got
lovely.
people from
Yeah.
all over the U.S.
Oh,
and
wow.
Australia. I saw
Oh,
in
wow.
Stockholm.
That is lovely.
Stockholm, as far
Yeah,
away as from
someone from
Stockholm.
Very close.
Very close.
But thank you either way.
Yes. It's lovely to see the interest from
Yeah.
all over. Yeah.
Yes.
And so one of the questions that somebody asked and somebody seconded was about that some groups have rallied around Benjamin Franklin, the perception of the Great Awakening to claim America was founded as a Christian nation. Thoughts? And somebody else supported that. I was just thinking the same. Is there any way to put the Christian nation to rest?
That's a loaded question.
Well, you need
Yeah.
to tell them who you are. By the way.
Oh, I'm Caroline. I am doing the master's program here at SDU, and I'm in class with Helena.
Yay.
So we're in our second semester. So we've had Tad this semester, which has been lovely.
She says before final grades.
Yeah. We haven't got our grades yet, so we'll see. But no, I think the U.S., was founded on religious principle. I mean, the whole idea of, well, everyone is created by God and everyone is equal. I mean, we just talked about that in the hall, and the
Mhm.
fact that Locke says everyone was created equal in nature by God. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone is equal
Mhm.
in reality, but everyone is equal by God, and that was what they believed back then, and that's the foundation of what the U.S. was based upon.
So how can you really divorce? Because it ends up being kind of a question about, and I hope everybody can hear Carolina.
Yeah, sorry.
That when you have a nation in which the language is based upon the concept of even just sort of a soft kind of monotheism, right? I mean, that it's constantly a reference to God, to divine providence, to nature and nature's God, that there is kind of that source from which all rights come, from which all liberties come. When you have that language running through it all, how complicated is it then to start unpacking it and say, well, they said God, but they didn't mean that God. Right.
Yeah.
So Locke can say that God and think, okay, well, there might be kind of a Judeo-Christian element there. When Jefferson says nature's God, he's certainly not thinking about that. But if they're all using the same words, but they might mean something different by them, how do we today? And I think this kind of gets to your point, because this is what the Christian nationalists really focus on.
Yeah.
I mean, they focus on that language and they say, okay, well, here, this is self-evident. Right. If we go back to Clarence Thomas's speech that he gave at UT, and we talked about that speech in class last week, I think.
Yeah.
And when he says, and I think it's representative of kind of that Christian nationalist perspective, when he says that it is self-evident that God means God. Well, no, it doesn't. And so how do you fight that?
Yeah. I guess. I mean, to go back to can you separate it?
Mm-hmm.
Can you separate government from religion? In theory, you should be able to. We have done it here. You've done it so many places around the world. But I think because religion is so heavily tied to the individuals who are part of said government and have been throughout history, I think it's very, very difficult to start separating it piece by piece when there's so much trust and maybe devotion and faith in government, and that, as Clarence Thomas said, God created the government and gave people the chance to rule in his stead, in a sense. So I think because it's so deeply ingrained, I think it would take a lot to start separating it.
Right.
When people believe, especially the extremist Christians, and it's so built into what they understand as government and what they understand as the United States, that to separate that, you'd have to go back. I think it's almost too late. In a sense, and I think only.
And I thought I was cynical.
I think only a revolution of sorts in the U.S. could, and I think you'd have to fully dismantle the current system in order to fix it.
There you go. I think that's more to the point where I am.
Yeah.
Right. Is that all of the arguments for Christian nationalism presume one thing, that those founders are relevant to and should be consulted in terms of shaping American identity and American behavior today. And so if we're going to keep going back to their words, and they're using these words, and we're going to hold them up as a kind of standard by which, we have to operate everything. And so we can't interpret the Constitution unless we know what James Madison thought about it, right? Until we sever our reliance on the founders and founding as being the be-all, end-all of American identity for all time, that the words of 1776 have to matter to us in very particular ways today, until we cut that, and people start taking their own responsibility for what America is and what America can be, that these words can be updated by disconnecting ourselves from a bundle of enslavers. But anyway, that we can, until there is that kind of revolution, then I don't think you can get at the Christian nationalist stuff. No. So it's more a Lincoln. It's more of a disconnection from the founding. Lincoln, as much as I'm not a huge fan of Abraham Lincoln, but Lincoln in December of 1862, in his what amounted to the State of the Union address, presented his plan for ending slavery, and his plan was essentially on the British lines, right? Just pay them, right? If it's about money, then and money can solve the problem. Use money to solve the problem. Pay them, have gradual manumission, and slavery would end by 1900 under his plan. It would be very gradual. Yeah, very gradual. But his argument to Congress to pass it was that, and this is a line that gets repeated a lot, is that we must think anew, we must act anew, and his point was that we must disenthrall ourselves. You have to. He made an explicit argument, disenthrall ourselves, that they have to cut themselves loose from abiding by what the founders did. Not something normally associated with Lincoln, but that they can't just sort of hold on to that part of the Constitution because the sanctified founders wrote it in, and therefore you have to sort of abide by it. No, you're going to need to change this in order to do this halfway measure of his approach to slavery. But this idea is, I think, what Carolina is talking about is that to disenthrall, to think anew, to act anew. We have new challenges. It's a new world. That's an argument Lincoln made in 1862. And I think that it's something that we should. One would think that for the 250th that we could have that conversation. Is it relevant at all, or is it doing more harm than good? We're talking about voices not in the room. Mm-hmm. That's one of the conversations, I think. Yeah. These folks get to hear me all the time. Yeah.
I think someone asked if it's the issue with Christianity, if it's the type of Christianity that is the issue.
Ooh.
But they're asking as a pagan. It said that. So it says as a pagan. But I guess, is it the issue with Christianity?
Well, if we're talking about sort of evangelical Christianity, and we understand that in the United States, in terms of the studies that have been done on it, that the most extreme Christian nationalists represent a kind of extreme evangelicalism, so that kind of Protestant evangelicalism, that if you think that God is playing an active role in your life every day, and that God is telling you also, and this is one of the arguments, that your country is founded by God in order to forward his, her, or their interests, then your role on earth is to follow that guidance. And that's that's doing some real harm. And so I think you're right. The kind of Christianity, if we're talking about a more kind of, liberal idea of of certain religions, that, just kind of stay out of it. It's sort of interesting when we're talking about religion in the founding, that it's not that people didn't have beliefs, it's that beliefs were intensely private, because one of the lessons coming out of the 17th century to them was that people talking too much about religion will make people start shooting at one another. So keep your beliefs to yourself. And you can't trust somebody who is being guided by a voice nobody else can hear. So make it a private thing, keep it to yourself. Don't trust people who are in fact talking about it a lot. And that the Second Great Awakening did away with that quite nicely. So I think it's that kind of shift in America towards that kind of religion, I think has a real meaning.
I think there was a question on the Instagram.
A question on the Instagram.
Question on the gram.
If we go back, there you go.
Let's see.
I don't know.
Wow.
Oh.
Sorry, Olivia. Wow. I almost booted you off or reported your comment or something like that. A lot of people in the U.S. have a hard time taking the founding fathers seriously when they owned slaves but claimed all people are created equal.
Yeah.
Yeah. No notes.
No
notes.
No
Right,
notes. That was
right.
perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That part.
I think.
Yeah.
I think taking them seriously.
Did I use that right?
Yeah, you did.
I did.
You
All right, cool.
You guys
All
are
right. I'm now one of the cool kids. That's
Yeah.
cool.
I think taking them seriously, I mean, they do still take them seriously. I think a lot of scholars just choose to separate that part and say, oh, they were slave owners, but they created
did
the
all
United States. Look at how
Mhm.
great they were. So I do think they choose to take them seriously and then ignore that part of their history
Mhm.
and only use it when it's relevant to a certain discussion.
Right.
So nitpicking of the founding fathers.
Right.
For what's relevant, for what's not relevant,
to fit a narrative.
to fit the narrative. So,
Right.
but they said all men were created equal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they had 200 plus slaves.
Yeah, right.
So how do you can take them seriously for the work that they did, but you also do have to acknowledge the fact that they were, to some extent, hypocrites,
Yeah.
you could say. So I do think taking them seriously, they do to an extent, but only in the foundation of America.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To Americans. I'd
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Now, I think that makes sense, and that when you say "but" always enters into the chat. But is the most overworked word in all of these discussions. That they did X, they oppressed this many people, their entire lives and government was based upon brutality and exploitation, but they created the greatest, most free country the world had ever seen, but he wrote the Declaration of Independence, but he was the architect of America's national creed, but always enters into that chat very quickly. And the but, though, is not a balance. The but's an excuse.
Yeah.
And so you're supposed to, and this is something that in my work, and we have talked about this in class, that is always kind of present, is that at what point does that just kind of excuse the core point that we need to talk about, which is the abuse of authority that all of it's based on, right? And so because you need to get to this other point. So to me, it is, if you're talking about the brutalization of, and this shouldn't be the Tad Sturmer show, I get this, but but if you're going to talk about a system that's based upon oppression of 4 million people by the time you get to 1860, the argument is, yes, slavery was important. We needed to compromise on slavery to get the American Union. Well, you have real costs on one hand, and you have an abstraction on the other. That we have to assume the value of the American Union. Now, you can do that, but you have to make sure that you are prepared to start articulating and doing the math about the value of that union, what in fact has it been doing, in order to be able to balance out the cost. And I think that's what that but is doing. We're a nation based upon slavery, but but the Union was worth it. Well, was it? You have to start articulating that. One of the points that we were talking about, even in terms of the 250th, and with the folks who are here, is about the path not taken. And this was kind of a discussion around Charles's speech to Congress, that I think what most people, because American history education tends to be really nationalist, meaning that it just focuses on the United States. It doesn't focus on what was going on in the Atlantic world at the same time. And so what people don't know is how that the countries that kept the crown. I mean, 1776, we're talking about the American Revolution, the Revolutionary Age. So the United States founds itself as a country that loudly throws off monarchy and king, and creates an exclusionary republic that has led to an imperial presidency. But what most people don't know is about how every country that kept the monarch has turned into some of the strongest democracies in the world, all parliamentary democracies in which the executive is shockingly weak. And so if you situate Charles in that, Charles has no authority whatsoever. So if you sort of think about, okay, what is the road not taken here? It's an interesting comparison.
Yeah. There's a group who believe Trump has been anointed by God to restore our Christian nationalism. White evangelicals really love Trump. Yeah, I mean, he's also being portrayed by media, his own media, of course, which is basically at this point almost all of it, as if he is sent by God,
to make America great again.
Yeah. Same with the post we saw the other day of him and Charles, two kings. He was put next to Charles and said he's a king.
Is the equivalent.
Equivalent to a king, which is like, this does not make sense when we're trying to celebrate us getting away from that.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're getting back to this narrative because we just want everyone to believe he's the best. He's so great.
But how does that work? How does anybody believe that? Right? I mean, because the story, somebody is shaping the story. They're getting out the story, like in all of the media, right?
Yeah. But I guess they've had time to think this through.
Mm-hmm.
Like during his first presidency, he was scary, but he wasn't that scary.
Yeah.
He didn't. There's different scholars who just say that he didn't have the foundation within the Senate, within the House, within the government to properly set up his extreme totalitarian power that he now has.
Mm-hmm.
And he used those 4 years to set it all up for himself.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Republicans who back then said, oh no, Trump is a bad idea, we don't want him, are suddenly singing a different song now. So I think he's had time to slowly set the base, at least at that level. And also within the people, within the public, because we saw the election. You saw how different the voting or who was voting for him in comparison to last election. It was a lot of the same, but there were a lot of new people who chose to vote. And he has a great foundation. I'm not saying it's a good foundation, but a great foundation to target those people and really get them. And it's only now that he's breaking down democracy, essentially, within the US, with the aid of all these people, that the public is starting to realize, oh, wait, he is acting like a king. So it's not only MAGA or Trump supporters who are like, oh, yeah, he is the king. Like, we support him. We love him. It's also the Democrats and the other public who are like, oh, no, he wants to be a king. So it's furthering that narrative, even if the media is doing it like, oh, king, king, king. They're like, oh, no, he does want to be king. So there's this, it's both sides of the same coin where it's like, yay, king, no king. But everyone has the same idea. And that's furthering his idea of who he is. And I think that's what's making it worse.
There you go, folks.
Yeah.
Well, but thinking about how, like, sort of in terms of the uses of the 250th, how can we in fact take this opportunity as an opportunity to get at some of those issues? Because I'm not quite so sure those are the kind of things that we were even talking about in an event like today.
Yeah. I guess it's time for another revolution.
I guess it's time for another revolution. There was an image that Frank put up during his talk that was a part of this People's Bicentennial Commission that I mentioned. But there were signs of a kind of like a protest crowd or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And one of the signs was long live the American Revolution with revolution underlined. There was a couple signs out there
Yeah.
that said that. It was impeach Nixon, Nixon must resign, oil companies must pay, and long live the American Revolution. And I thought that was an interesting context for that, is that if we want to sort of take that seriously, then Americans are being fairly passive with accepting these narratives and not sort of challenging them, which I think is odd for people who like to embrace this identity of being revolutionaries and at heart.
But then there's the question, are they scared too? They've seen the consequences of ICE. They've seen the consequences of what happens to those who speak out. We've seen scholars quietly leave the U.S., yourself included. I mean, we've seen just quietly. No, others have left quietly, but slowly leaving, slowly just hoping that the next election will do a difference, and just hoping for change rather than being the change. I think. Hoping that someone else will do it for them.
I will support them, but I won't get out there myself.
And that's I've been reading a new book. It's called Revolting. And it's, are you revolting? Would you revolt? What would it take for you to be the one who stands out, who goes against? Would you die for a cause? What would you do? Would you be that? Or would you just sit there and wait? And it's reading that, I'm like, would I sit there and wait? What
are
would
you
be
sitting
enough
there
for
and
me?
waiting?
Am I sitting there and waiting?
Yeah.
What would be enough for me to finally say, this is enough? I need to do something.
Right.
And I think a lot of Americans are feeling the same way, where it's, okay, he's going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Where is the breaking point? We don't know what's going to happen when the U.S. breaks, when the people are done, because people are saying they're done.
Yeah.
They're protesting.
It's the classic bystander effect.
Yeah, it's the bystander effect. They're hoping
something's wrong, but
politicians will do it. We'll fix it eventually.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they will. But we have another 2 years.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just, so we're talking about the Supreme Court decision. So it's not just Trump. It's not just 2 years, right? I mean, Trump didn't make the decision that the Supreme Court that Alito just handed down last night, and the response sort of get back to sort of Carolina's point about being the change or sort of waiting for change. I think that's a good way of looking at it when we're talking about the 250th. We're talking about the American Revolution. Is at what moment do you, and we talk about that a lot in these spaces, at what moment do you have to become the friction in the machine? And we see that with leaders who are, and we don't have to have a value judgment about this. We sort of just lay out the fact of it, that leaders in Congress are responding to what the Supreme Court did against the Voting Rights Act with calls to pass more legislation, that a court that is already stacked against it can just interpret back out of the Constitution, can just say, well, no, that's not what they mean. So it took 80 years to get the 14th and 15th Amendment added to the Constitution. It took another 100 years to get the Voting Rights Act to, in fact, make those active. And then it's taken 60 years to get rid of the Voting Rights Act. And so given what it took to get those passed in the first place, given what it took to, in fact, roll them back, what does a call by a senator that we just need more legislation and that will fix it? That's more responsive. We need to fight. I'm going to introduce this bill. That's my response. There you go. That is mine. So if you see your leader saying, okay, well, the change that we're going to be is I'm going to introduce a bill that might not even have any hope of passing. Think about what it took to get the Voting Rights Act passed. Think about the Civil Rights Movement. Think about all of that work. What would it take to get something passed again by Congress to even come close to repairing what has just been done? And that is with a Congress that is now going to be reframed by the congressional district remapping that's going to result as a product of this. So when you get to the point, well, be the change. Well, what kind of change do you need to be versus what kind of change are other people saying is sufficient?
Yeah, because protesting was sufficient. I don't think it is anymore. And I don't think, because what has the response been to the protests? ICE being deployed, the National Guard being deployed.
People being killed.
People being killed for not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, more people are gonna die
Mhm.
in this.
Yeah, I'm afraid so
And
too.
within the next few years because of this. And I don't think it's like you said, okay, well, Trump's out. Okay.
Yeah.
Like all these things he set up and managed to do are still there.
Yeah.
We're not going to get the voting rights passed.
Yeah.
Passed again. And a lot of the acts, I think I remember you saying that they held the Louisiana senators from attending or
Charles Sumner.
For some of the amendment. We can't do that now.
Yeah.
Like that's not
Yeah.
possible anymore.
Yeah.
It might have been in the 1800s.
Yeah.
But we can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't.
But why not? What Carolyn is referring to is what the radical Republicans did in Congress to get their stuff through and the kind of hardball that they played. And so she's referring to when Charles Sumner in 1865 filibustered to keep Louisiana from returning its senators to the Senate, and therefore Democrats putting them back in to go ahead and which would have stopped anything that required a supermajority to get through, including the constitutional amendments that they needed to pass. So they weren't going to be able to pass the 14th Amendment even through the Senate, even if those two senators got in. And so he filibustered to keep them out, to keep Louisiana from coming back into the Union and back into Congress. He stood up and he started talking and he didn't stop. Not something you would see today.
No.
But
I guess
why?
they haven't thought of it.
Yeah. Well.
And I guess, would it be illegal to hold senators against their will in a room until an amendment can be passed?
Well,
I'm not saying you guys should do it, no, but I mean, if you keep them where they are until something's passed, I think we need a lot more people to be held back.
Well, right.
Than just Louisiana.
Yeah.
But could you do it?
Well,
or do we just need enough senators reelected in all the states for it to be possible?
Well, and then you're talking about, well, okay.
Then it's once again the long game.
Yeah, that's the long game. So if the costs are, and this is, getting back to the uses of the 250, is that if we think about what required the Patriots to get to the point where there's like, okay, this is enough, that we're going to go ahead and say against people who are saying, well, let's play the long game. We can negotiate, we can compromise, we can work to something better, that instead of throwing out what we have in terms of the British Constitution, that we can in fact, we don't need to create harm, we don't need to create disruption, we can in fact play the long game. And other people saying, no, the harms are so great and they're coming up upon us so quickly, whether they were true or not, but it's what they believed, or at least what they said they believed, is that we can't wait anymore, I guess is the point. And so we can't, the long game will do more harm.
Politicians always say that.
But the politicians always
say no one's in it for the long game.
Yeah, no one. Well,
you can say the monarchy is because they're always there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Although they can't do anything.
Right.
They're there for the long game.
Right.
They always have been. Whereas the democratic system, where it's just not targeted towards a long game. Not that I would want a long game with the current politicians. But with the if you only have 4 years, why should I play the long game?
Yeah.
Oh wow, because it has a built-in. You think it's kind of has a built-in kind of sunset.
Yeah, there's a
right?
built-in mechanism to not.
We can in fact wait it out. When waited out, you can see as being, oh well, it's just to the November election, or it's just to the end of the first term. Oh well, we have an opportunity to go ahead and get them. So you can. Oh, that's
it's like
that's new, right? That's interesting. That's right. And what do you guys think about that in terms of does that element of American politics actually inform, actually inspire people just to wait?
Yeah. And maybe that's the bystander issue.
Wow.
They've been socialized into thinking, let's just wait. It will get better. I mean, even for the Republicans with Obama, I don't doubt they were thinking, let's just wait. It will get better.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. What do you guys think about that?
Someone said, I think Christian nationalists have played the long game for the last 50 plus years.
There you go.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Because they're thinking structurally.
Yeah.
Right. They're not thinking politically.
No.
Right. They're thinking. I mean, that was kind of what I think Steve Bannon was able to really connect with, is understanding that we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this locally. we're going to go ahead and structure our attack to go ahead and get judges and on every level of the federal judiciary and get all that done, and then we'll be able to gut things through to Congress and do other things like that. So I think it's
So is it only ideologically or religiously that you can play the long game? Because
yeah, I think so.
Because someone said wealth accumulation is the long game for many in
Yeah.
elected office, which is also true.
That is true.
So money, ideology, religion, those are the long game structures. But it's also, I'm sure Casper Rasmussen could come in and tell us all about the people pulling the strings from above.
Yeah.
Our conspiracy theorist professor.
Yeah. We have a colleague who works on
the
those,
New
yeah.
World
New
Order.
World Order.
I'm
Yeah.
sure he could come in and tell us all about how someone is playing the long game.
Yeah.
We just don't see it.
We just don't see that.
And it's not visual.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how much longer do you want to go?
I don't know.
They were done at 45.
They're done at 45.
And then it's lunchtime.
And that's fine. Okay. Well, then maybe we should wrap up if they're done at lunch and ready to wrap up. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. I hope you have found this valuable. I found it very interesting. And it's always great to have folks on here. And we might come back and do this again.
Yeah.
All right. Alizy?
Bye.